This is week number 3 of Tricycle's January online retreat. This is my third talk. In the first two, I talked about the precepts first in a general way, including mention of repentance as a helpful way to reset oneself. And I talked about first the 3 refuges, taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as arguably the most important of all 16 precepts. Then the second talk, I talked more about the 3 general resolutions. I resolve to avoid evil, I resolve to do good, I resolve to liberate all sentient beings. And now I'm going to focus in these next 2 talks on the 10 Cardinal Precepts, which is a further articulation of these 3 avoid evil, do good, and liberate all sentient beings. First, some general words about these 10 Cardinal Precepts. They're in Zen, my teacher and his teacher saw these 10 Cardinal Precepts as quite different from the 10 Commandments in that they're not prescriptive so much as descriptive. That is, they're not saying what you should do and what you shouldn't do so much as describing. What do they describe? They describe the nature of our enlightened mind, our true nature. So when we say that these 10 precepts are resolved not to kill, are resolved not to take what is not given, and so forth, that this is how we would function, the way we would conduct ourselves in our lives if we were fully enlightened. And so none of us is fully enlightened. Enlightenment, by the way, is in degrees. A first awakening can be very tenuous, and then you can deepen that first awakening with subsequent enlightenment experiences. According to the tradition, it's only the Buddha himself, Shakyamuni Buddha, who realized what our tradition calls supreme perfect enlightenment. These 10 Cardinal Precepts describe how a supremely enlightened person would function. The rest of us use these 10 precepts as guidelines to help us navigate through the world of decisions and dilemmas that we all face from time to time in our lives. These 10 precepts can be understood as a kind of scaffolding, and this endless process of awakening, practice and awakening. We start with a scaffolding to find our way with moral guidelines, and then eventually, if we were to fully grow into our innately enlightened nature, then we won't have to so consciously be considering, reflecting on these 10 Cardinal Precepts. So it's like it's not that enlightenment imitates the precepts. It's rather the precepts imitate enlightenment. They just are a conceptual framework describing our true nature. This is important. It means that we're not fighting an uphill battle to become something we aren't. We are, we have always been, this enlightened awareness. This is our potential that we can realize eventually. And so upholding the precepts, these 10 Cardinal Precepts, is a way to live up to fulfill our nature. That's how we understand it. And the connection between upholding the precepts and our meditation practice is a very intimate one. In fact, we can say that in meditation, all 10 of these precepts are realized. But when I say meditation, I don't mean just while sitting in a formal meditation posture. That, yes, but in Zen, we see meditation more broadly as extending into our daily lives. What does that mean? It means that in everything we do, in all of our responses to people, our reactions to changing circumstances and conditions, that we respond to life with this mind of stabilized awareness. Stabilized awareness. That is, from a Zen perspective, that is the mind of so-called meditation. So it's absolutely vital that we understand Zen practice not just as sitting. That's a hugely important part of it. We need to do that every day. But more broadly, as bringing that into our daily lives. Without the daily sitting, I'm convinced of this, without daily sitting, we wouldn't stand a chance of being able to function in our daily lives out of this mind of stabilized awareness that is our true nature. So, the mind of meditation. Let's look at very quickly. The 10 Cardinal Precepts are: resolve not to kill, I resolve not to take what is not given, I resolve not to misuse sexuality, I resolve not to lie, I resolve not to cause others to abuse alcohol or drugs, nor to do so myself. Those first 5 are what are called the 5 grave precepts in other Buddhist traditions. And then in addition to those 5, there is I resolve not to speak of the faults of others, I resolve not to praise myself and disparage others, I resolve not to withhold spiritual and material aid, I resolve not to indulge in anger, and I resolve not to revile the 3 treasures. We mentioned that earlier in my talks. The 3 treasures are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which is really our true nature. So when we have this mind of stabilized awareness, whether we're sitting or we're out and about with people in life, every one of these 10 precepts is being realized. First of all, when we're not killing, dismissing what's happening to us, that is the reality of this moment, then we're upholding the precept. We're not killing. When we're completely with the moment, we don't wish for something else. That would be sort of the second violation of the second precept. When we're completely present, we're not using our sexual energy to try to change our experience of what is right now. When we're fully present, in this mind of stabilized awareness, we're not lying because we're fully in reality. The 5th precept, we're not trying to intoxicate ourselves. Besides alcohol and drugs, we're not trying to get into some kind of a contrived mind state to avoid the simple presence of what is right now. Let's just stop there. Those first 5. Again, this intimate connection between the mind of meditation and upholding the precepts. These two are like, I think the Buddha said somewhere, it's like using one hand washing the other. That's how close this connection is. I can't emphasize it enough, the importance of upholding the precepts to support one's practice of meditation. I would say that the translations, these 10, as I articulated them, that's what we have refined over the years, over the decades here at the Rochester Zen Center, as what I feel are the best kind of way of getting to the real gist of these 10 cardinal precepts. Other Zen centers have different versions of them, and the versions are not unimportant. Many years ago, I came across a version at another Zen center, a Zen center that had been riven with some misconduct, teachers' misconduct, and I was dismayed to hear how vague the wording of some of these precepts was. So, for example, for the 3rd one, I resolve not to misuse sexuality, but to be caring and responsible. what they had was no attachment to fulfillment. There's a lot of wiggle room there for interpreting that in a self-serving way. For the fifth precept, which we say is not causing others to abuse alcohol or drugs, nor to do so oneself, what they had was no selling the wine of delusion. What does that mean? No selling. It sounds suspiciously like they're not talking about alcohol or drugs, something else. So I've always felt, as my teacher Roshi Bodhin Kjolhede did, that the actual wording of the precepts is important. We don't want to give ourselves too much room for rationalizing and wiggling around these things. At the same time, each one of these 10 precepts can be interpreted more strictly or more loosely. And that, in a way, that's what it all comes down to. How do you interpret each of these 10 cardinal precepts? Well, I think a very workable, general way of understanding them is in 3 levels: the literal level, the essential level, and the practical level, or rather the compassionate level. So let's first the literal. The literal is not something in Zen or in Mahayana Buddhism that we place as a high priority. Literally would tie your hands and feet, and you'd hardly be able to function. So, for example, with the first precept, I resolve not to kill, but to cherish all life. To take that literally would mean not pulling up vegetables because you're killing them. Here's a story that shocked me the first time I heard it. In Southeast Asia, there is a stronger tendency to interpret these precepts literally, and I mean literally. So I heard from one of my former disciples who lived in Burma at the time, presently known as Myanmar, that while she was there, she was living there for some years, and one day in the capital of Rangoon at the time, they saw a rabid dog running through the streets. It was foaming at the mouth. It was obviously had rabies, and in alarm, she jumped on the phone, and they called the local police, and they said, "You've got to do something about this dog." The police said, "We are Buddhists. We are sorry, but we do not kill any living being." Well, what happened? The dog bit a number of people, and 9 of them died. 9 people died because they took the precept literally and they wouldn't shoot the dog. So this is what makes the 10 precepts so complex and difficult, is because they are subject to different interpretations. Or to take, to get into the human realm, if you had a madman on the roof of a building with an assault rifle and a telescopic lens, and there was no other way you could disarm him, and he was just shooting people, what do? If necessary, you shoot him. That is not, from the wider perspective, that is not a violation of this first precept. But under this precept, let's continue with the first, not to kill. So if we don't take it absolutely literally, then we're left to sort through all of these ethical dilemmas in terms of animal experimentation, vegetarianism. Actually, I don't see vegetarianism as much of a dilemma. It's very simple in modern American life to have a healthy diet without eating flesh foods. But there is that. Gratuitous killing of insects. Do you really need to slap a random mosquito, or can you just brush it off? What about abortion? What about euthanasia? I'm not going to try, in the short time we have, to tackle these very daunting ethical issues, but they all would fall under this first precept, not to kill, but to cherish all life. So there's the literal level of never killing anything. That's impossible, it seems. But then there is also what we could call the essential level. Now, from the essential level, this is important to at least mention this. From the perspective of our original nature or our essential nature, there is no killing. There is the word doesn't obtain. It's not applicable to talk about killing and life and birth and death and life and death. These are ultimately constructs of the human mind, and Zen points us in our meditation. It points us to this realm, this essential realm, where such categories don't apply. This is a very advanced way to understand the precepts. Another way of understanding it is that Zen points us in our meditation to the source of all systems of morality, this realm of no mind, this realm that is beyond all moral considerations. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on this, even though it is an essential part of the precepts, is to experience that realm, because it gives a birth to all kinds of moral systems. But in terms of the ordinary person finding her or his way through moral dilemmas, it's not very useful to talk about the essential realm. In fact, there isn't much to say about it. So I'm just going to put that aside in looking at these 10 cardinal precepts and go to what in Zen we would consider sort of the middle way, which is what could be called the realm of compassion. A way to make this more understandable is, you could say, it's action that is based on the greatest good for the greatest number. So what may seem to be, on the literal level, causing harm for one or a few individuals, might be the better thing to do in terms of the greatest good for the greatest number. And that's where all this difficulty with interpreting comes in. So I'm going to just zip through, before ending this third talk, I'm going to zip through a few of the other precepts. That was number one, not to kill but to cherish all life. The second is not to take what is not given, but to respect the things of others. Notice, to say not to take what is not given is a little more strict wording than not stealing. You could fudge this precept and convince yourself that I'm not really stealing. For example, not returning something that you borrow, not taking something. Here at the center we have what we call the donations rack, where people can bring clothes, nice clothes that they no longer want, or books and things. Across from it is the lost and found, and someone might find something quite appealing in the lost and found and convince themselves, well, it's not exactly stealing, we don't know who it belongs to. But from this precept, not to take what is not given, this would rule out that taking of something from lost and found. Basically it means, this precept means not stealing, not swindling, not cheating, not thinking possessively, or taking advantage of others in any way. It's strict interpretation. And let me just add that for each of these 10 precepts, it can be understood on the level of action, actually doing. It can be taken on the level of speaking, and it can be taken on the level of thinking. Thinking, of course, being the strictest, not to even think in terms of coveting, wanting to take something that belongs to someone else. I think the most compelling statement I've come across for this precept is again from Japanese Zen master Dogen, when he said, "Each person naturally receives his allotted share in life. He need not think of it. He need not search for it. The allotted portion is there." If we were to have faith in those words, it would make it a lot less tempting to ever take anything that didn't belong to us, including things about taxes that that are really dubious, about tax things. I also need to say that for all of these 10 precepts, it's a given that we will be tripping up on them, especially if we look at them from the strictest point of view. We will be breaking these precepts from time to time. And from a Zen perspective, what we need to do is just be mature about that. Okay, we're not fully enlightened. We're going to be tripping up now and then, and just resolve to do better and move on, and not to get into a neurotic obsession about every little thing we're doing and whether we're breaking precepts. This is very, very important, because that very neurotic obsession will be another kind of interference with our meditation practice if we're dwelling on these things, but just moving along. The third of the 10 cardinal precepts, the third of the 5 grave precepts, same thing, is not to misuse sexuality, but to be caring and responsible. At one time, we had a different wording for this. The wording was resolve not to, well, the rest was, but to lead a life of purity and self-restraint. That's the important part. And we had all these questions. What does it mean to lead a life of purity? And I came to feel that it's too suggestive of a life of celibacy, which just isn't at all the meaning of it for unless you're a celibate monk. So I changed it to not misusing sexuality, but to be caring and responsible. Maybe someday we'll tweak it and find another kind of translation for it. But it covers a lot of ground. Traditionally, not misusing sexuality means not engaging in adultery and not abusing or misusing one's partner, which also would mean not having sex with an underage person or someone who is mentally disturbed. So this is a given. This is the worst kind of violation. And then, but beyond that, there are these somewhat gray areas. Certainly, rape is not a gray area. Date rape is a little less black and white, but it's also a violation of this precept. You could say that in the broadest sense, any kind of sexual games where you're using your attractiveness as power or conquest, whether you're man or woman, this would be a violation of this precept in the strictest sense. Using one's sex to the detriment of others. The main point here is the presence or absence of attachment, craving attachment, compulsion versus freedom. Zen and Buddhism has no problem with healthy sexual expression, and that doesn't just mean 10 toes up and 10 toes down. It just means that it's done with freedom and with caring and responsibility. That's the really gist of this precept. We have to acknowledge our sexual energy. It's part of being human. We suppress it at our own risk, and then that this sexual energy grows out of the same mind of our spiritual practice. It's not really different. It's not apart from. Nothing's apart from this true nature and our striving to realize it. But we can transmute our more neurotic, more unwholesome forms of sexuality into something that is really for the sake of love and caring. Another aspect of this, violating this precept, is not using the province of sexuality to entice someone to do something they don't want to do, or the threat of withholding sex in order to entice them to do something they don't want to do. And I always feel obliged in talking about this precept to offer up my own firm belief that this in no way, that homosexuality in no way violates this precept, as long as it's done in the same spirit as we just outlined here. Quickly, the fourth precept is not to lie, but to speak the truth. There is so much mischief and suffering that we can cause by through our lying. And there's all kinds of lying. There's dissembling, there's lying in advertising, there's a lying in politics, there are little white lies that are really debatable whether they violate this precept. With the white lies can be done to spare hurt feelings of others. If someone wears a suit that we think does not look good on them, and they ask, "How do you think this looks on me?" we don't have to say, "Horrible." We can just find a way to artfully, without saying it looks great, not indulge in honesty. Too often, what we call brutal honesty has more brutality in it than honesty. What prevents us from being direct with people and not lying? I'm convinced that very often it's fear. We're afraid to be honest with someone. We're trying to protect something in ourselves. So to be honest with someone, where it makes sense, is always, that kind of honesty is always seen by an aware person as more important than the particular transgression. In other words, acknowledging with honesty that one screwed up somehow. When one of my students does that, what I see is not the transgression. That sort of recedes. What I see is character. The strength of character to acknowledge one's missteps, one's transgressions. Then you can move on from there. But otherwise, it can really get into a lot of trouble. The fifth precept, not to cause others to abuse. Notice the first part is not to cause others to abuse alcohol or drugs, nor to do so myself, but to keep the mind clear. Of course, this means not coming under the influence of alcohol or drugs. But more broadly, you can say that it warns us about anything that excites us or incites us or dulls us. Any kind of addiction, any kind of state of hysteria or delirium. And in that sense, it can be seen more broadly. There's a little story that people seem to appreciate that I'm going to tell before we close. It goes way back, centuries ago, that a certain man was being plagued by a demon. A demon in modern terms would be just some kind of unwholesome mental influence. But let's call it a demon, just to make it more interesting. He's being plagued by a demon who told him that he would only leave him in peace if he consented to break one of the 5 grave precepts, these 5 that I just enumerated. Now, this man was a sincere Buddhist practitioner, and he had always kept the precepts, and he went through them. He first thought, I can't break the first. To kill another being is a terrible thing. The second, I've never stolen anything in my life, and it would be a crime to do so. The third, I've always been faithful to my wife. I don't want to hurt her by breaking that one. The fourth, if I broke the fourth, it'd be sure to make someone unhappy and bring myself a bad name. And what about the fifth? The fifth, alcohol and drugs. All right, a little bit of liquor. What harm could there be in that? And then he could get that devil off his back. He'd never tasted alcohol before, according to the story. And he thought, okay, just to start with a little drop. And, that's pretty nice. So he thought, a little more won't hurt me. And so he had a little more, and before long he was roaring drunk. So on his way home, staggering home, he passed a vendor on the road, and he just in a moment of impulse, he stole some trinkets from the vendor. He got home and he found his wife absent, and for the first time he noticed how pretty his neighbor's wife looked. And he went over to her and gave her the trinkets, went into her house, and after some time she proposed that they have some food, so he took an axe and butchered a goat. And finally, he came up with the vendor he had stolen from, came up with some police officials and accused him of the crime, and he denounced it, declaring his innocence. So the point of the story is, a little alcohol can open the way to all kinds of other violations that just get us deeper and deeper into trouble. That's all the time we have today, and for the fourth and final talk, we'll get into just a couple of other precepts in more depth.